My name's Darryl Gregory. I've been in Honeywell since 2006 and currently are our UK South Partner Channel Sales Leader, which covers the Trend and Centraline brands. I think the role itself hasn't changed, but it's become more interesting because for me personally, historically I was just part of the Trend business, whereas now I'm also part of a Centraline business. And so it's given me a different perspective. So I was very much kind of orange Trend thinking, whereas I've learned a lot in the past 2 years of different ways of working. So within my own mind, I do a lot of, if you like, best practice sharing just from what I see in the two businesses. So it's been a good learning experience, I think. I'd like to think I'm better at what I do, having my kind of horizons broadened. So probably not what I expected at the start of it. Because very experienced in one business and maybe didn't even understand that other brands do it in different ways. So I think we position them differently. So Trend is clearly the larger brand, UK market leader by quite some way. Its core values have always been around it's a safe investment for end users. So within Trend, we try and offer the latest technology, but also the best support in the industry. And our core kind of philosophy has always been backward compatibility. So our challenge for the R&D community that work within Trend is we want tomorrow's technology, but we want it to work seamlessly with something that somebody installed 30 years ago from us, which is an incredible challenge if you think how technology's changed since 1983 when we launched the first IQ controller, and now our factory just up the road here, an IQ4 controller works seamlessly peer-to-peer. So what we try and do in Trend is offer good, strong heritage, safe investment. You won't get that conversation from us where we say, in 5 years' time, we've moved our product portfolio on, so you need to rip everything out and start again to benefit from that technology. You can have the old and the new. And then Centraline is a much younger brand in the UK. So Centraline has based its portfolio on the Tritium Niagara framework. And I think the Niagara framework is seen as the leading integration platform. I look at it and the answer is always yes with Niagara. There's nothing it can't do because I compare it to kind of like an app store community where any one of us could sit and write a driver. It doesn't have to be developed by the manufacturer. I think there's huge benefits to having it developed by the manufacturer. Again, coming back to support and longevity and kind of the long-term investment of the building. But Centraline it's been more of a growing brand, but we're now winning some really big projects. So 22 Bishopsgate, one of the biggest towers in the city. There's a whole host of good buildings. So we position them slightly differently. It's quite interesting for me because I have a Trend sales team and a Centraline sales team, and they compete against each other every day. And it's, I think that's been quite motivating for each sales team because it's not nice to lose a project to somebody who you know very well. It's not good for your ego. So I think that's been one of the unintended consequences of me looking after both brands. It's made my sales team more hungry. But it brings some challenges in how we run it because there's obviously customer confidentiality. So things that I may have used to have done in sales meetings, I don't do anymore. I do them independently. And then when we bring the two teams together, we might spend time thinking about sales techniques rather than individual projects we're working on. So I think it depends on where you are in the supply chain. So if we start kind of with contractors, what we offer within Trend is we've got by far the largest partner network in the UK. So when we say partners, some people would call them customers, but we just don't see it like that. We see them as partners of our business, and their role in life is to take our core product and then deliver it into the marketplace as part of a wider solution for the building envelope. And because we've got such a large and diverse network of partners, as a contractor, you can look at the marketplace and decide who you want to install your product. So sometimes that will be based, of course, on economic realities, but quite often it's based on the culture of the business or the niche markets they've maybe worked in. So you can choose a trend solution and then get a true apples for apples tender process using the partners that fit best for your portfolio. So I think firstly, it's one of my pet hates when a system is deemed as being poor because it's not working properly in a building. Generally, and I'm always very open about this, I think every manufacturer's system has the ability to control the building. And you are right, it's entirely down to how well it's installed by the partner, and quite often there's a whole host of external factors that can influence how well it's installed. Did they have the right amount of commissioning time in the program, or did it get shrunk to an extent where they couldn't actually do what they wanted to do? Has the building actually been designed in a way that it can be controlled? You know, there's all sorts of issues that stop that. But for our part, I guess the focus on us is we try and spend a lot of time helping with specifications, applications with consultants. So we try and get in very early in a project and work with a consultant to understand what they're trying to achieve, or what the end user's trying to achieve in that building, and then build a spec that will actually enable it to be delivered. Because BMS is a tricky industry, it's getting more complicated all the time, and so we think helping people to understand what they can do makes it easier. So generally the better the spec, I think the better the project goes. But then secondly, with our partners, one of the things we've always done really well in Trend is we've spent a lot of money investing in training. So whether that's classroom training, e-learning, CPD seminars, because I think in our industry, because it is changing constantly, you have to stay on top of the latest developments. And our view is the best way to get our partners to represent our brand the way we hope they do, and in all honesty the way they do excellently every day, is to make sure they're the best trained in the industry. So we have training schools in different locations across the UK. We run a whole variety of training courses, from very, very basic entry level, your first step into the world of BEMS, right through to a course that a very seasoned professional engineer would still learn from. So I think collaborating with specifiers and end users to understand their needs and translate that into a document that one of our partners can pick up and work with. And then at the other end of the scale is do everything we can to help our partners train their employees to do the best job they can every day. And then when they do run into problems, make sure we're here to support them, because it is very complicated what we do at times. And we've built a very strong technical support team that understand our product and understand the applications that they're installed to. And when there's a problem, we stand side by side with our partners and just work through it. So I think there's two types of projects. So for me, you get a project where there's a known end user and somebody's moving into that building, and then there's the project where it's a speculative build. So in the example of the end user, I think really we all have to take responsibility. Of course, it is ultimately the end user's responsibility, they're buying their building. But if we look at all the trades and technologies that go into a building today, of course, they're not going to be experts in all of them. So ideally, if I look at our approach, we'd like to work directly with that end user and just have that simple conversation. When this project's finished, what do you want out of your building? And then work back from there and make sure the right things are left in the project and anything they don't need is taken out. In reality, the end user isn't going to want 50 trades coming in and having that conversation. So they'll have their trusted advisors, generally the contractors if it's D&B, or consultants. And it's for us as an industry to educate those people on what should be in, what shouldn't be in. I think the challenge, or one of the biggest challenges I've seen over the last, certainly since 2008, is value engineering has kind of lost its way a little bit. So for me, value engineering is going to an end user, looking at what's been proposed and saying, you're not going to benefit from this, so why have it, take it out, but actually you should put this in because you need it and it's not in there at the moment. Unfortunately, I think it's become a bit of a term whilst we've been in kind of tricky economic times, just to reduce the cost of the building. Now, I've seen many examples, I'm sure you guys have as well, where the wrong things have been taken out and you end up walking away from a building and not really being proud of what's been delivered, feeling it's a bit of a missed opportunity and knowing the end user isn't going to get what they want through the life cycle of their building. So I do think it's on all of us to educate in that process and understand who should be talking to the end user, whether it's us directly or through their advisors. I think it gets more tricky in a speculative build because there isn't an end user. So we need to try and deliver a building to a good standard, an acceptable standard, but it's much more difficult when you don't know how that building's going to be used. So typically, if I look at where I spend a lot of time in the London commercial office market, a building will be built open plan and then at some point it will be let and partitioning will be put up, and this can cause all sorts of issues because how the building's used wasn't known when we were doing the BEMS install. So in that instance, I think it's much more difficult, but again, we've got to engage once there's an end user known. So I'd like to see an end of projects where the installation's done and it's the fit and forget mentality. I really like the kind of soft landings approach where you stick with the building once people move in, so you can really finely tune it, understand the pain points that maybe weren't envisaged on how the building's been used, and then just work with the end user to deliver exactly what they want. And I think, the argument is, will that cost more money? And I think I don't think it has to, but even if it does, I think there's a lot of studies now around well-being and productivity in building, and we're starting to understand that just saving energy or saving day one install costs is not good for the long-term profitability for an organisation, and certainly not good for long-term staff well-being and retention. So I think we just spoke about productivity and well-being, and I think that's certainly one of them. I've been in the industry since 2000, so still young compared to many people who've been doing it a lot longer. But even in my relatively short time, I've seen a drive from it being all around comfort to being all around saving energy to now it all being around that productivity and well-being and using technology to enhance a business. And this is I think where we are at the minute is really exciting. There's some huge challenges around it because I'm asked weekly, can I have a smart building? And my response is always, well, what is smart to you? So we haven't really educated the market on what can be achieved yet. We're still kind of finding our way. But I think this is the most exciting time because now we need to create comfortable, energy efficient, but actually useful, productive, great for people's well-being buildings. And there's some brilliant examples going up around the world at the moment. And I think this is going to be, for people entering our industry, this will be the golden generation. But the downside is buildings are going to get a lot more complicated. So some of the old contractual chain way of working, I don't think will work in the new world. I think it has to be a more collaborative approach, and you get this, but we can't work in isolation. I think at day one, more people are going to need to be around the table to design that building, to bring all of this technology together, because the reality is it's going to be delivered by lots of different contractors as part of that construction. And if anybody tries to do it in isolation, everybody's so interdependent on each other. We're going to have to work together closer than we ever have. And I think that will be better, because I think that will take away some of the combative contractual relationships you sometimes see. I think now it will have to be more of a team effort. And I think that will be good for everybody. And ultimately, the end user will end up with a building that delivers what they need for their organisation. That is happening slowly. I think you typically see it with the big blue chip style companies, but I think they've realised that if they're saving a little bit of money on construction day one costs, or even a little bit of money on the operating costs, but it's making their staff less happy, less productive, that's not good for business. And ultimately these businesses, they want to succeed in whatever their goal is, whether it's profit driven or goal driven. But the reality is they need their people to be the best they can be. And I think certainly in the modern world, it's becoming a more competitive marketplace. If we look at, if you like, the tech industry, there's a relatively small pool of staff that businesses want to attract because they're the best at what they do. And one of the ways, if you look at those companies, how they're attracting those people is by creating great environments for them to work in. So it's not by paying them more money than their competitor. It's by saying, look at the environment we allow you to work in. We create an environment where you can do your best work because that's what you really care about. Yeah. The money's kind of, you know, we've all got bills to pay. Of course, they want to be paid, but they're driven by doing a great job. And some of these people are driven by genuinely changing the world, and they want to do that in an organisation that puts their well-being and productivity at top of their agenda, rather than turning down the heating to a level where it's uncomfortable just to save a few pennies. So I guess we've started to see a change in that. So some of the larger consultancies now are building smart, intelligent buildings divisions. Because I think there's a realisation that, again, it can't be done in isolation. You can't have a smart mechanical package and a smart electrical package. They absolutely depend on each other. So the example I always use is, if we can't get the BMS and the lights working together, so in a meeting room, it should go in, there should be people sensing technology, it should know there's people in there, or even better, how many people are in there, change the air volume, bring it out of a setback state into an occupied state, look at the outside kind of light ambience, look at the insides, make all that work seamlessly. If we can't just get that tiny bit of mechanical and electrical to work together, then we shouldn't be chasing the rest of the smart building dream, because that's absolute basics. And we are seeing more, I guess, more people doing this better. Again, I think as manufacturers, we have to take the responsibility. So we're quite fortunate in this building here. We share space with Exor, a sister lighting business. And that helps because in the same consultancies, they had a lot of relationships with the electrical guys, we had a lot of relationships with the mechanical guys, and we've actually gone in and brought those people together. So again, you know, there's two ways. You can sit back and wait for it to happen, or you can look at the problem and try and try and fix it yourselves. And it will happen. It has to happen. I think the more forward-thinking end users are driving it as well. They're telling the professionals they're hiring to help them develop buildings, this is what we want, so you need to find a way to bridge that gap. But it'll take time before it becomes the norm, and we've got to be realistic. So I think for any BMS manufacturer, if this isn't their number one priority at the moment, I'll be very surprised. I certainly know within Honeywell, one of the changes I've seen is the R&D process has become much more complicated because we scrutinise each development from a cybersecurity point of view. I think there was a phrase a customer said to me many years ago about the BMS industry was, it sometimes feels like it's security by obscurity, because there was a feeling that nobody would ever want to try and gain access to these systems. And of course that's nonsense in the modern world. There isn't a week that goes by where you don't read on the BBC News about some kind of cyber attack one way or the other. So I think everybody's become more aware of cybersecurity, and it doesn't really have to be that difficult. When you look at most of the cybersecurity issues, most of them are human error. So most of them are either IT systems not protected properly with VPN tunnels and the like, or old versions of software and not having a regime for patching with updates. So I think the first thing we all have to do is understand the importance and accept the importance of it. So does it make the systems more complicated to install? Absolutely. But it's the same reason you'd have a lock on the front door of your house. You want it to be difficult to gain access to. I think then as a manufacturer, our responsibility is we accept that cybersecurity can be difficult. So we've got to look at our product portfolio and see what we can do to make it easier. So we want to make it almost harder for our partners to put something in that's insecure than it is. So secure out of the box is really what we need. And I think certainly in the last few years, we get asked more questions about cybersecurity than ever before. So I think the whole contractual chain, from the end user, the contractors, the consultants, our partners, everybody's aware they need to do this. And then as a business, you have to take a proactive response, and we use some specialist tools to go and actively search for systems that might not be secure and then fix it. But of course you want prevention rather than cure, as one of my colleagues here says. But this is the big problem. So the IoT piece, I think it's a given that more systems are going to be connected to the cloud. I think in the BEMS world, IoT is nothing new. I think we've been connecting systems to external servers for decades, but I think this is going to happen much more. And we've got to make sure we're not using standard passwords. We've got to make sure the same kind of principles we use in our IT equipment. So here, every 3 months, every 2 months, whatever it is, I'm asked to change my PC password. We need to be doing that across our BEMS. We need complex passphrases rather than 4-digit pins. So there's a lot of it is the basics, but I think it does come back to that collaboration. So when I joined the industry, the IT departments were sometimes seen as a hurdle you needed to work around. Now they should be the first people we bring to the table, because they are the absolute key. They understand networks better than all of us, and when we're designing the BEMS system, they should be designing the IT system with us, and the two should go hand in hand and be not an afterthought either way. And where we see this done well, those systems are, you can never say nothing's unhackable, but they're as close as you possibly could get. So I think our approach has always been to have plenty of feet on the street driving it. So to give you an example, if I look at some of our most successful projects, it's where we have our key account team, and they'll have a relationship with key end users, and they're able to talk to them about what can be achieved in their building, can understand their needs, and then tell them how we bring the BEMS to help them achieve it. So having that kind of team that can work with those end users is valuable. Then we've got our business development team, and they spend a lot of time in the consulting world. So they'll work with the M&E consultants and contractors, and they'll collaborate with them, quite often taking the conversations that the key account team will have had above them and saying, right, this is what we know the end user wants, how can we make this happen? And it's really how can we make it happen, because we can't do it on our own. It's, we need the right plant, the right design, the right teams in the project. And so I think you've got to, if you want to collaborate properly, you have to accept that it can be an expensive process. You have to accept that you're going to employ people to do that. And ideally, they need to be face-to-face. So I think we've got over 30 people on the street every day in the UK out doing this exact thing. So collaborating with end users, collaborating with consultancies and contractors, and of course working with our partners every day. And that bit's really interesting, because it's quite bi-directional there, because we probably learn more from our partners about what can be achieved with our products than we do ourselves, because our job at the end of the day is to create a product that our partners can do things with it that we haven't considered. And that's the beauty of the partner network. They're a network of 160 entrepreneurial innovators, and that's our strength. But if you talk at all levels about what you're trying to achieve, and you have the right people and enough of them out there, that's how we believe we can change things for the better. And that's really, I guess, what our goal is. Is there a risk? I think there's always a risk, and certainly some of the companies, including our parent company, who are driving that, they've got deep pockets, and the investment in technology is fantastic. I actually have seen it as a positive for our industry, because I think if you look at the typical, for instance, user interface that's delivered as part of a project now, you can see it's clearly influenced by those more consumer-led products. So my view on life is anybody in a building should be able to go up to a display and interact with it and use it without a training course. 10 years ago that would have been much more difficult than it is now, because we're kind of, the term I use is the iPhone generation. Nobody gets a manual for an iPhone, you just pick it up and you just somehow find your way around it without even realising you're competent at it. So I think the smart home piece is really good. I think when you look at the principles of some of that smart home technology, it's taking commercial BEMS control and putting it into people's houses. It's starting to link systems together. So I guess the first time I really saw real value in it was when Nest had the smoke alarm and the thermostat, and your smoke alarm goes off and it turns your boiler off. It's so simple, but that's real value to someone, potentially life-saving value. And then also when you look at the technology around geofencing, and I think this is something as a BEMS industry we haven't done a huge amount of, but actually sensing in the modern world where we're all very flexible with our time, instead of setting a time program on your thermostat and actually doing it based on where you are and starting to turn it on as you get closer to home, so it feels like your house is always the right temperature. I think extrapolating that up into the built commercial environment is really, really interesting. It's doable, but it's not always commercially viable at the moment. But I think that's a really, really interesting development. So I think whilst potentially there is some risk, I actually think it creates more opportunity, because I think the experience that people have in their homes now, they're going to want in their workplace. And I think that's still where companies like ours are really well suited, because we've got the heritage and we really understand those buildings, but we've also got some cutting edge R&D technology, some that's available today. So IQ Vision changes how we supervise our systems, how people interact it, any device, anytime, anywhere. But also there's a lot of stuff that if I did tell you about, I'd be in a lot of trouble. So I'm not allowed to reveal that just yet. But I think this is an exciting time. I think that what's happening in people's homes is going to change expectations for what happens at work, and I think that's a really, really good thing. It's an exciting time to be in the BEMS industry. I think it's an uncertain time around Brexit. I think the lack of political decision on that is making it difficult for end users to know how to invest. But that will pass, that will sort itself out in, I'm sure, the next year or 18 months. But fundamentally, buildings are getting really exciting at the moment. I genuinely you can see I light up, I get so excited thinking about what can be achieved in a building now, and how we're going to really make a huge difference in how people work, and we're going to make a huge difference in how productive businesses are. And probably most importantly for me, we're going to make a huge difference in people's well-being at work. We all spend a lot of time at work, and I think the days have been sat in kind of cubicalized pods, almost like a machine, like a robot is stopping, and we're really starting to think about how do we make people happy at work, how do we make them active, how do we create environments that encourage people to collaborate within their own organisations. So we're seeing, I like stories like where businesses are now putting less kitchens in their offices, because then it forces more people to the same one, and you get that sparking of ideas while you're both making a cup of coffee. So I think these things are really interesting. And as the BEMS package that creates the environment for us in the BEMS industry, I think this is a fantastic time, and we're going to be doing things with technology that 10 years ago seemed like Star Trek kind of stuff. And I'm really excited as where this will all go. And I'm really excited to see the smart building be defined and it become real in every building, not just a couple of kind of cutting edge buildings. And I think this is going to be the best era for not just BEMS but for construction, and we're going to see things in buildings that truly blow our mind, but they're also seamless. They're not forced. You just go into a building, you interact with it in a different way. And I think this is a game-changing era, and everybody should be excited to be in our industry at the moment. So I'm a huge supporter of it. Probably one of the driving forces in our business of educating how we can use it. I think we spoke about collaboration, we speak about education. And the power of social media is you educate and collaborate with people you don't even realise you're doing it with. So I think social media is a double-edged sword. If it's used properly and responsibly, it's fantastic. I do see people use it, and I don't particularly like how they use it. I think it can be quite negative. Where I just think it's a wonderful platform to talk about what you do well, to ask for help and advice, to share thoughts, personal views, and I think I've seen the amount of messages I've received from things I've posted from people I'd never heard of before, who have either said, I agree with what you're saying, or can I have some, you've hit on a problem I've got, can I have some help? So I think the tool is absolutely huge. And I think in our industry we've been quite slow to adopt social media. I think we don't necessarily understand the reach. Certainly in a corporate environment we're naturally nervous because not everybody maybe understands the consequences of what one bad, if you ask Gerald Ratner, he made one bad comment one day and it sunk his business. But I think what we're realising is actually letting employees have their views about your business and what you do is actually really good, because the adage I always say is people buy from people. And so I'm not the biggest fan, if I'm honest, of corporate social media posts. What I'm a big fan of is where I see people's opinions, because I see, particularly on LinkedIn, for me it's like a mini TripAdvisor. I want to hear where people are having good experiences, and then I want part of it. So I try and use it to share what we do well in our business. Particularly I like to talk about the buildings we're in, because I think that's more real than talking about what we do in this office. And I think used properly, it can be game changing for your organisation, because you reach thousands of people that you'd have no other way of getting hold of. And if you're saying the right things, they'll come and want to work with you. And then that's where you do build, you can build your business around it for effectively a next to nothing marketing budget. It's fantastic.